Hey folks! Today's video will be me babbling on, hopefully somewhat coherently, about a problem with Battlefield 4 that irritates me to no end. It's not just BF4, but any game that requires an online check-in with some system in order for the game's owner to play it. No, I'm not going to complain about DICE's apparent lack of code QA, or the game crashing, or DLCs being problematic, or anything like that. The last bit of C code that I wrote was in college in the early 90s. While I was a pretty damn good C hack, I did nothing during that time even remotely close to the complexity of an online shooter. I'm not qualified to complain that DICE's code sucks. The crashes annoy me, in fact they infuriate me sometimes. But I don't know why they happen and have no real qualifications to tell DICE otherwise. Designing systems, however, is my specialty. I spent the last 20 years or so in the service and content provider business. Architecting, engineering, and running large data center networks is what I do for a living. I'm also quite competent at understanding how servers and systems run. Not the game server that you and I connect to when we play BF4 together. I mean what's behind the scenes. It's also known as the infrastructure. Infrastructure isn't glorious and exciting, but it's required or things on the internet just won't work. My assumption is that DICE isn't in charge of the backend infrastructure that BF4 is using. My guess is that EA, as a parent company, has an infrastructure team. That team is likely responsible for making sure that all of EA's online properties can be accessed and played at any given time. My focus for this complaint is on those folks, not the guys writing the game. Today, Sunday the 20th of July, the BF4 stats server appeared to have died. Checking forum field, it appears as though the initial reports started coming in right around 05:30 Eastern Sunday morning. As of about 12:30 Eastern Sunday, everything appears to be back up and running. I don't know the precise downtime, but 7 hours seems to be a good estimate. In my perhaps not so humble opinion, 7 hours is unacceptable. That means it took the aforementioned infrastructure team almost a typical workday to discover the problem, figure it out, and repair it. For that 7 hours, folks couldn't play Battlefield 4, and server owners were rewarded with empty servers that they were paying for. Why did it take that long? I could make some educated guesses, but they'll require some thought as well as some questions answered. How complex is the entire stats server infrastructure? Complexity is the hobgoblin of a robust system. Younger, inexperienced engineers tend to try and over-engineer a system. Whether it's to impress their superiors or to just try and flex their engineering muscle, the results are pretty easy to predict. System crashes and difficulty in fixing them. Systems crash. Networks crash. The hardware and software used to run systems isn't 100% reliable. It's damn near impossible to make something 100% reliable. Even the simplest thing in the system, which would be a piece of Ethernet cable connecting two devices, has a less than 100% reliability rating. Understanding this simple but annoying fact is key. If you know that systems will break, then you should engineer two important things into that system: easy monitoring, and as much simplicity as possible. Any service or infrastructure provider should have an operations center of some variety. Think mission control. It's staffed 24/7 by 365, with people that know how to monitor the system or systems in question. Ideally, they should also be able to fix some of the more simple problems without calling the engineers that built it. The operations center is key because they'll see problems pop up before anyone else does. But they can only see that assuming the system is being monitored properly. That means something, or a group of somethings, is constantly making calls to that system and reporting back success. An even better solution is to have the system monitor itself and constantly report back to a stats server of some sort. The folks in the operations center then watch the stats servers and jump into action if something seems off. Then there's simplicity. This is a lot harder than it seems. Oh, I want the system to have this cool feature, and that cool feature, and the next cool feature too. Well, the more cool features you add to a system, the harder it is to fix it when it breaks. Remember what I said earlier, everything breaks. The more complex it is, the more likely it is that it will break, and fixing it will take a lot more time. When it comes to fixing a system, generally it takes almost 90% of the time to figure out what the problem really is. Actually fixing it is usually pretty easy. With that in mind, a simple system will reduce the problem discovery phase down fairly dramatically. It may still take 90% of the time to fix the problem, but if you've reduced the complexity, you've probably also reduced the overall solution time quite dramatically. I don't know how complex the stats system in Battlefield 4 is. I don't work for EA, so what I'm saying here is just a series of educated guesses. But given that aforementioned 7 hours for repair, I'm betting that the stats system isn't as simple as it could be. I'm also questioning whether it's actively monitored properly by a team of operators. I could be mistaken, but based on my observations, I'd say that isn't the case. As we've found over the years in the service provider business, customers will accept a little downtime. They get annoyed, but they'll generally understand that it can happen. If you can give them an acknowledgement that the problem exists and a decent estimated time to repair, they'll usually accept it and go on their way. You can further help them by making sure that total repair time is as small as possible. With more and more of EA's titles doing online check-ins, it'd behoove them to improve their infrastructure significantly in these regards.